You are in the meeting now. There are 12 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded.
Well, it's 12:01, and we have all of the commissioners here.
Do we have Lee?
Yeah, I'm here.
There he is.
No video, but he's there.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we can get started. And everybody can hear all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So, Madam Secretary, I would ask you to call the roll.
All right. Commissioner Swanberg,
Here?
Commissioner Boyd,
Here.
Commissioner Carp,
Here.
Commissioner Pecora,
Here.
Commissioner Gaston,
Here.
Commissioner Guster,
Here.
and Commissioner Mateos is here as well. Everybody's here.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I want to welcome everyone to the meeting, which I will now call to order. We have a couple of preliminary matters. I have fallen away from this practice that I had started last few months. I'm just going to remind everyone and ask everyone to keep in mind that we are all in this group respectful of each other. We are respectful of each other's comments and viewpoints, and we will be discussing perhaps some contentious issues today, but I would ask us all to again, keep a civil tone and a respectful tone, and I think the meeting will go much better that way. So thank you for that. Another housekeeping matter, we will have our business meeting, and at the end of the meeting, we will have public comments. Unlike our past meetings, we will not be having an open chat box today. That has been, I think, a distraction and has led to some very disturbing comments in the chat box in the past. So in the interest of allowing commissioners to focus on our work without those distractions, we will not have the chat box. We will, as always, be making time available at the end of the meeting for public comment, and we encourage public comment. We welcome public comment. We don't in any way want to minimize that. If there is any member of the public who is participating in the meeting who would be unable to speak at the end of the meeting, we would ask that person to send their written comments to our secretary, Ruby Mateos, at her email, which is ruby.mateos, Mateos, @davenportiowa.com. So at the end of the meeting, our secretary will be checking that email, and if there are public comments there from someone who can't deliver those comments themselves, she will do so. I guess the other housekeeping matter I would mention, I think some time ago we were asked to provide to our staff person, Beth Badillo, a statement from us as commissioners and a photograph in PDF form, and I don't think that has been happening. So I would just ask people to draft just a short statement. It could be a couple of sentences, about maybe the reason you're serving on the commission, why you feel it's important work, why you want to be involved, and then provide a photograph to Beth, and I think she needs it in PDF form. So thanks very much for taking care of that.
We have a deadline for that?
We can certainly set one. Do people think they should be able to accomplish that by the end of the month? So let's say that everyone will get that to Beth by the end of the month.
It would be helpful if Beth would let us know who has and who has not submitted the statement, because I just don't remember.
Okay. Okay. So Latrice, if you will pass along to Beth, that some of us need to be reminded whether we did that or not.
We don't have them we have a statement from you, Janelle, and Commissioner Boyd, but it was for the annual report, and she wasn't on the commission at the time of that report, so we have hers for next year, I guess.
Okay.
And we don't have photos for anyone.
Yeah. So by the end of the month, if we could do that, that would be great.
Okay, so you didn't receive any of the photos that I sent?
No,
Direct-
I don't think we have a photo for you. I don't think we have a photo for you.
Okay.
And
I'll
I would
double
say,
check with Beth.
Ethelene, I submitted a photo, but it was not in a format that Beth could use. So I think she specified to me that it needed to be a PDF. So if that's not the case, I'm sure she'll let us know what format she does need.
Both the photo
For the
and.
photo?
For the photo.
Both
It
the
can be
photo and the
JPEG.
statement need to be in PDF?
No, the photo can be JPEG.
JPEG,
Okay. Okay.
but the statement needs to be PDF. Right.
I'm not
Or-
sure.
or
I think it
Word.
could. Yeah.
Or you can
Word?
just send an email directly that has it. I think it was supposed to be being sent to Janelle, and then that way that she would know who has submitted it, and then she could follow up with those who haven't, but you can send it directly to Beth.
And please let me know if you have a problem doing that. With that, I would ask people to look over the agenda if they haven't done so, and I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Aye, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any opposed? Then I think it is unanimously passed. Thank you. Next, I would ask people to review, if they haven't, quickly, the August 1st, 2020 minutes. That was our first special meeting. Have people had an opportunity to review those minutes as published?
Did we have a moment of silence at that meeting?
Not the first.
I think that was at the next meeting, Ethelene.
Oh, I think there was at like the June meeting.
Well, I think we had a moment of silence at the June meeting, but then we had a moment of silence for Clyde. And I think that was.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
August.
that's right, yeah.
So any additions or corrections to the August 1st minute? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
I move that the minutes be approved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion? Hearing none, I would ask those who are in agreement with the motion to signify by saying aye or raising their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I think the minutes of the August 1st meeting have been unanimously approved. Your director's report, Latrice.
Keep forgetting to unmute myself. So we had no right to sue letters issued during the month of August. And we had 2 cases settle during the month of August. One of those settled in conciliation for $7,500 and relief from the public interest. And that case involved allegations of sex and disability discrimination. The employee felt that they were being treated differently than similarly situated male employees, and that they were being targeted for termination based on their disability. We had a second case that resolved through outside mediation for $16,000. See what fun things we had. So we have, every year we have a engagement plan that we submit as for a $1,000 grant with our EEOC contract. So this year I'm working with community members on drafting an event where we work on disability discrimination and associated stigma with that, and to do outreach events and to kind of destigmatize the issue. So it's mentioned in 7, but I'm going to use that for our EEOC FIPA engagement plan. So we're working on submitting that. And I reached out to, so at the last meeting, Commissioner Pecora brought up the issue of public housing. And I was directed to contact him to see exactly what questions he had about that and add it to the agenda. And I reached out to Bruce Berger, who's the director of the Community Planning Department. And he said that the property has not sold yet, and that he really couldn't give a lot of information about it because they haven't briefed even council about it yet, and they're still in the midst of the process. But he did want me to assure everyone that there are lots of legal protections in place for impacted people, both through HUD and through the city's processes.
You know, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
I don't buy that. I in the past month, along with Jim Richardson, we're both with the Ecumenical Housing Development Group, and we submitted proposals for that property. And we found it confusing, and we found, as Jim says, the goalposts are constantly changing.
And Richard, I'm sorry, I'm going to break in here. Let me just say that this, I think, is on the agenda for later, so probably
okay,
during.
that's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And then I contacted the rest of the commissions where we were looking for processing numbers to see if I can update the ones that we have missing. So we got an updated document on that, which I will bring up in a minute. And we continue to get feedback from community members about policing concerns. A couple of the more concerning ones were, one person mentioned that they had a warrant, an arrest warrant served at their home, and the person had COVID, and the police entered their home and without masks and arrested the person, and then asked after they were already inside if anyone had COVID or if there were any concerns with that. And after touching the person and touching things, they then took off their gloves and left them there at their house. So yeah, so that's a I guess ever evolving document.
Can Latrice, this is Mike. Can you repeat that one more time, please? I didn't quite get it all.
The last sentence or the whole thing?
That whole process about it kind of broke up when you said COVID. The police entered and some individual was in there that may have had COVID or something. Just repeat the whole sentence, please.
So someone contacted our office and they said that they had an arrest warrant served at their home. It was for someone who had COVID, and the police came in without masks, and they were wearing gloves. And they, after they got inside, asked about this, if anyone had COVID or there were any concerns related to that, and they disclosed it, and they went ahead and arrested the person, and then they took off the gloves that they were wearing and left them there at their home. And so the people were obviously upset. So they were contacting us to raise that as an additional kind of issue with the lack of safety protocols, I guess we would say, in dealing with community members who have COVID.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Sorry, just clarification. The person that they took had COVID?
Yes. But they
And they
entered
weren't-
without masks, so they were
They
just like,
weren't wearing masks.
yeah. And the person was, I guess, secluded in a room. So they were, the person who contacted our office was saying, we were able to kind of contain it in this room, and they came in and interacted with this person and then left the gloves there at the house, so possibly exposing the other members of the household.
Not that you can answer this, Latrice, but I want to kind of clarify this. The person who was arrested had COVID, yet the police took off their gloves and left it at the house, whereas one would think that they would keep their gloves on because they would have to have contact with this person all the way to wherever they were taking it, to the jail or what have you.
That's what they said. That would make sense. But that's what they said. So I don't know if they changed gloves, took them off in the house, and then put on a new pair. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So
But yeah, it would make sense
I
that they
want to
would be
test
wearing.
those two cops. I want them tested like right now.
Yeah.
So the
Go
officers
ahead.
are able to take people out of their sick bed.
I don't know what the processes are, but that's what the report was from the person who contacted our office, is that the person was, and that they disclosed that before they left.
Interesting.
We do a lot of programming with the library. We've had, we right before COVID affected us personally, we had some programs set up with the library, and we had to cancel those. So we're now focusing on doing some online programming with them. So we're working on ideas for collaborative programming that we can do that would be kind of meaningful and would also be a good interactive thing to do online. Before we were working on encouraging people to have courageous conversations or uncomfortable conversations, and how that can break down barriers. So we might pick back up with something similar to that, or we might kind of evolve and do something a little more engaging. This is also we're in our last week of, or a few days of resolutions for employment cases for the year. So we're a little overwhelmed. So we've been doing a lot of work on that, kind of all hands on deck. The old business, the harassment, the issue with the police department and Brian Heyer, I guess maybe Janelle can give an update on that.
I think these matters should be kept confidential. That seems to be the plan in the city administrative code, which calls for them to be confidential. I don't think they should be discussed in an open meeting. I would suggest a meeting with Latrice, you, me, Rabbi Karp, and Mike Guster to discuss all these issues. I don't think it's not on the agenda, and I don't think it's something that we're going to vote on. So I, in the interest of time today, I think we should move on.
Okay.
Is there more to your report?
Yeah.
On the budget discussion, is there something?
Do we want to discuss it, or do we want to move past it?
Well, I know that we were sent something, but it was so recently that I don't know that people have had a chance to review it. And I guess it would be important to know maybe at this juncture, if you could just report to us, what the timetable is on, making input on the budget and, how we might impact that process.
Before we move on with the harassment, the old business, I'm not sure what that was. Was that when we and our director were received communication from the police department union?
Well, and Ethelene, let me just say that, like I say, it makes sense, I think, to deal with this in a meeting, to talk about the efforts that have been undertaken so far in this regard. And it really shouldn't be discussed in an open meeting. So we're going to have a meeting of a smaller number of people who have been involved in these discussions so that we don't take up time in this matter that, as I say, is not on the agenda. So I'm sorry to cut it off like this, but I think that's just how it has to be. Is that okay, Ethelene?
Yes, I'm just trying to make sure I'm in touch with all the items on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, like I say, this really isn't on the agenda. And with regard to the budget, I mean, Latrice, what would you say about the timing and when we might address the council, if at all?
I thought you were working with them on scheduling a time to come before them. I thought the consensus was last meeting I was going to provide kind of a visual document of where our staffing levels were and staffing and budget was in comparison to other commissions, and also a request for budget increase, how much that would be, and maybe a budget amendment for training this year.
Yeah, and so do you have that available?
Yeah, so that just for me to get this straight, I think this, this question of the budget, you just sent out an email with the budget, if I'm not mistaken. And the purpose of that was we're talking about making a request to the city council for expanding funding to the commission so that we can process more civil rights cases. And that budget that you sent out is the baseline for us to understand what we're spending, how much we have now, and what we're spending it, how we're spending it on, so that we can make an informed recommendation for increased funding. Is that right?
Well, thanks, Henry. I think what we're talking about here is I'm just asking Latrice if she has been able to put together what we feel might be helpful in addressing the city council.
Wasn't there an email just a little while ago?
I think what we're talking about is not, yes, the sort of the first budget document from the city has been provided to us. But as Latrice just said, she, I think, was going to work on, our particular request and exactly what form it would take. So I'm asking Latrice whether you've been able to put that together. And if so, then we can work on, getting on the agenda of a city council meeting and talking with them about it.
Did I miss the budget email?
It just came right before the meeting.
Yeah, it just came just before the minute. So Latrice, should you and I discuss this? Latrice?
I thought that I was asked to provide this for the meeting and present the visual of it for the meeting and to present it during the director's report.
So do you have it?
Yes, I'm asking if you want me to put it on the screen or if you want to move past it.
No, I put it on the screen. That's fine.
Put it on the screen, definitely.
I don't have the email, but okay.
Okay. So I guess the first thing maybe I should share is that this year, there is, the city is changing from, I can't see what's being shared on my screen because Zoom is
It
a
says
little
budget
weird.
it says budget policies 2022 budget.
Okay, there
And
we
then
go.
it's a bunch of paragraphs of prose.
So the city is changing the way that they do budget planning, and so it's going to shift from year to year to a 2-year budget planning. So the document says it will be adopted for fiscal year 2022, and then looking ahead to fiscal year 2023. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. The meeting, I guess, to go over this will be next week on the 15th. So I'll have more information about it then, but I'm not sure what that looks like and how that's going to be, how that affects us as far as submitting a proposal. And I think I guess they'll disclose that at the meeting that's going to be on the 15th. But going back to our specific discussion, let me find it now. I think maybe I have too many Acrobat windows open here. Okay. Oh, there it is. It just looks weird on the Zoom screen. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is if I zoom out like that, is that too small for everybody to see? Or is it still visible?
Good.
It's okay, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, except for the numbers down in the second box.
See if I can make it bigger.
My old eyes can't make those out.
There.
Maybe 75%.
Is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Good.
Okay. So these are the different cities that are kind of most comparable to us as far as size and how their commission is funded. So Des Moines obviously is about twice our size. The closest city in population to us is Cedar Rapids. So this is just the population. And then I only included the budget comparisons in the chart for fiscal year 2020. But below we have the budget comparisons for going back to 2014 for most of them. So again, obviously Cedar Rapids is the one that's closest to our size. And their budget is 587 and ours is 588. Dubuque is 602. They're a little smaller than us. Des Moines is 755. And this is the number of cases filed for the commissions for 2018 and fiscal year 2018 and 2019. 1 second, and people are attempting to join the meeting.
Why do we have so many? And then they don't barely have anything.
Davenport might just be terrible.
No.
Kidding. I'm not sure. We do have quite a few more cases than the other commissions.
And
I'm
sorry, excuse me, this is Janelle. Are Dubuque and Iowa City, are they just referral agencies?
Iowa City, I cannot find the information on their website. And I know they have had a lot of stuff going on, so we haven't been able to, the director hasn't been able to participate in our conversations, but I know they're kind of working on a lot of stuff. But from what I read in their ordinance, they do accept cases. And Dubuque is like a referral agency. They have it structured pretty weird. It's some kind of way the legal department reviews cases. They have an attorney assigned in the legal department to review cases, and they are, I guess, under joint supervision of the director, the civil rights director, and the legal director. And they then forward the case on to the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, but they don't actually do the investigations in-house anymore.
Thanks.
And staffing levels are for fiscal year 2018 and 2019 are here. So our staff is a little smaller than the other agencies. And again, we get about twice as many cases as those agencies. So especially Des Moines. So that's kind of a bigger city and we get about twice as many. And I'm sure they have not as many cases as we do because they are in the same city with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. So people probably file directly with ICRC. For the question of requesting an increase, our civil rights specialist conducts investigations for employment, education, public accommodation, and credit complaints. And then the housing analyst conducts the investigations for housing complaints. And there is a huge disparity between the number of non-housing cases and housing cases. So the civil rights specialist has a significantly higher caseload than the housing analyst. But the housing analyst has to conduct an expedited investigation in accordance with the HUD requirements. So, and it's a lot more intensive than the other investigations. So that's why they're assigned that way. And also that our housing analyst is funded from our Fair Housing Fund. And so we're supposed to spend so much money for fair housing. And the way that it's structured, it's basically that person's entire salary. So they're supposed to be doing housing related things. So I think if we are asking for an increase in staffing, it would be appropriate to ask for an increase of 3 civil rights specialists, so 3 investigators for the other areas, and 1 housing analyst due to the caseloads for those areas. And the salaries for those 4 positions, if we started everyone at level 1 on the salary schedule, would be about $216,000 to $19.73. And to figure trust and agency, which is insurance and additional benefits, we would just use the existing amount that we see in our budget for trust and agency for 4 staff, and that's $112,229. And so the total amount for those 2 expenses would be $328,448.73. And to allow for kind of variations in experience and step increases and varying trust and agency expenses, because say someone has a family, their insurance would be more than if it's a single person. I think it'd be appropriate to ask for an increase of $340,000 for staffing to get us up to a level where we could kind of manage the caseload differently and have, instead of having one person assigned to maybe, 120 cases, each person could be assigned to 30 or 40 cases.
And I'm sorry, Latrice, how many new staff is that, did you say?
4.
4. Thank you.
3 civil rights investigators and 1 housing analyst.
And then the question of training, I think it would be appropriate to ask for $2,500 per commissioner. So that would equal $17,500, because we need to do trainings understanding personal biases, in addition to the actual trainings on the civil rights laws. So yearly we don't receive enough money to conduct training for that many people. We kind of barely receive enough to send all of the staff to training. Oops, disappeared on me again. Yeah. Were there any questions about that or?
What about, there are other costs involved with conducting hearings. We talked about that when we went through all those cases and we had to reject so many of them because of the overwhelming costs and the overwhelming demand upon staff. But what are those costs per case, the additional cost per case? Because if we're increasing the number of cases that we're hearing, then we also need to have an increased budget to cover the cost of those cases.
So I think even if we increase the number of staff, that doesn't necessarily correlate to an increased number of hearings. But the hearings, the expenses that we have are obviously all of the staff time that's invested in preparing the documents and participating in the hearing during the pre-hearing discovery and all of that. We have to pay for the administrative law judge. And then we have to pay for the transcripts and associated documents that you would, one second, somebody's joining the meeting, that you would get in the course of planning for the hearing. So like in the Seeberger case file, you can see how that cost was broken down. And pursuant to the ordinance, when a case is found against someone, then they are responsible for the public hearing costs. So that is supposed to be paid back to the commission. But it gives a breakdown of how those costs are done.
Well, whatever those costs are, that has to be they have to be added to the additional costs, the additional request, financial request.
So you'd like to see an additional budget increase for additional public hearings?
Yeah. When we're talking about we need so much more for staff and so much more for this, so much more for that, we need to have so much more for the increased number of public hearings.
Okay. Do we want to outline how many more public hearings we think?
I think so, simply because that helps us justify the funds, and also in the likelihood of that they won't give us the funds, I think we need to make sure that we adjust it to the number near as we can that of the cases that we would have liked to have heard this year and stuff. So, and that would help us probably land somewhere where we need to be.
Okay, so if we say 10 cases total for the year?
So I have a question. I remember Latrice telling us that if it's a housing case, it needs to go to public hearing, correct?
Yeah, pursuant to the ordinance.
Okay, so if we're gonna do 10, and then for example, we get like 8 housing cases, that only leaves us 2 for other cases.
Typically what happens is it'll resolve before public hearing. But yeah, if there were 8 housing cases that went forward, there would only be room for 2. Based on what we've seen in the past with our numbers, that would be unusual. But if we can, I guess, give me a ballpark number and then we can break down what the cost would be. We can average out kind of what they've been for the last 2 or 3 public hearings and then factor out those amounts based on how many we think we would have. Not everyone all at once.
First of all, what's the average? We should look at what's the average number of housing hearings we generally get in a year over, let's say, the last 3 years, 5 years. What is the average number? And then that, maybe that should be the number for housing. And then what are the average number of requests for non-housing hearings that we have gotten over the years? And then look at that number. Then we need to throw into the pot the reality factor. How many hearings can the commission actually be able to hear in the course of the year? Yeah, but, so we need to, yeah, I mean, the cases that come for house, to the Office for Housing and for non-housing, and they're resolved, without needing to go to hearing, but how many, but we need to look at the average of how many requests we get for hearings.
So do we want to look at how many hearings we've had, or how many have been forwarded to public hearing, but maybe have resolved before it reached public hearing?
Well, it's how about public hearings we've had for housing, because if they've come to public hearings, we have to hear them. So that's, so an average for the years of how many of those housing hearings we've actually held.
Okay.
That's number one. And then for the non-housing hearings, I think we have to look at the number of requests for hearings, that we've received, because we haven't been able to come anywhere near touching that. If what happened a few months ago was, as we were reviewing cases, is the model. And so we need to kind of get a handle on how many.
So we've had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just repeating myself, so you go ahead.
We've only had one housing public hearing in the last 5 years. Usually once it's scheduled for public hearing, the parties, they continue to work on resolving it. And we definitely encourage that. That's one of the requirements of our contracts, and we just encourage that resolution as well. So we've had one, but I can look at how many were scheduled for public hearing, but didn't actually have a public hearing.
Okay, for scheduled for public hearing.
And then get an average of those.
Are we seeing an increased number of requests this year because of COVID-19 and the circumstances this year? Are we seeing an increased number of requests?
So people aren't able to request that the case go to public hearing. What happens is it goes through the conciliation process, which is it's like a second mediation, and it's required after there has been a probable cause decision issued. And if it doesn't resolve in conciliation, then it goes to the commission to decide whether or not to take it to public hearing. And we had so many in June because there was they've been sitting on the agenda from month to month. So usually we don't have that many, like we have 2 today, but we don't have a ton of them all on the agenda at once.
So do you think 10 a year is feasible? It's a good amount, just for a budget outlook.
Yeah, I think that's probably more than enough.
Although, I think Ethelene raises a good point, and that is, will we be receiving more housing requests for housing hearings because of the housing issues born out of the pandemic, especially since government funding for rent right now has been halted, and no settlement has been made, and people may be facing or have been facing evictions. They may want to come to us.
It's possible. We have yet to have any COVID-related cases. So a lot of our counterparts have had them, but we haven't, surprisingly. So I don't know if people are maybe don't know that it's an option to file if the termination was discriminatory and somehow related to COVID. But we haven't had any so far, but that's not to say that we won't get some as the pandemic kind of continues to spiral out of control.
So Latrice, were you indicating that maybe 10 more cases would be too many? I mean, do you think, is there another number that's more in line with what you think we could accomplish?
I think it would be good to look at the average number that has been scheduled and then come back with that number.
Okay.
I can look at the average number that's been scheduled
Sure.
and then the average cost and then come back with that number.
Great.
Is there anything else for budget that we had questions about? Additional information?
This is Mike Guster. I think that we gotta at least think about some cases that will come to us as a result of COVID-19. And I think we ought to plan for at least 3 or 4 of those. They ought to be in there, whether we get the money or not, they ought to at least be in there. And once again, we can go on the average. I'm gonna go with whatever we decide, but I can tell you that we ought to shoot for the 10, and we'll end up, I guarantee you guys, we'll end up in the area where we need to be at. And I say that because whatever you give them, they're gonna slice it anyway. They're gonna cut it. So that's just the way budgeting goes in any organization.
Okay.
Well, let's see what numbers Latrice comes up with when she looks at the average. And yes, I think we need to plan on increased cases because of the pandemic. All across the board, increased cases because of the pandemic. So we will need to factor some sort of number in to meet that.
Yeah.
And for housing cases, I should mention, we can seek special enforcement funds from HUD, and they might supplement us to take action.
Great.
Anything further on the budget? Anything further on Latrice's report?
Yes, I want to raise an issue on the report. We have seen from time to time, generally there are cases that are resolved. And we know nothing about that except like today, there's a case on sex and it's $16,000. I think we ought to at least be aware of those cases. They just sort of pass by us and we have no idea. And in part, the reason that I say this is that I know I'm part of an organization that I found out later that one of those cases came from the organization, and I talked to the staff people who dealt with it, and I heard their frustration at the way the process went. And so since it is part of our business and it comes out under us, just giving a one-line settlement, I think there ought to be a way that when cases are settled like that, we're at least basically provided with a summary so that we're aware of what's going on.
Richard, this is Mike Guster. So did I understand you correctly? Are you saying that somebody said that they had a problem with the process or procedure for their complaint?
Well, I think knowing them, these are people that operate by the book, and they're very compliant on things, and so they found themselves in that hearing, and suddenly they felt like their back was up against the wall, and they really didn't have much of an alternative but to open up the checkbook and pay. And so when I heard that, because I was curious, because I said, hey, tell me what's going on here. So all I'm asking is that we have sort of a summary there, because here we've got somebody's somebody's paying, opening up their checkbook and paying out big time. And I'd like to at least be aware of the circumstances and what's happening there, because it's happening under us, under the Civil Rights Commission. I just want to know. Maybe we don't want to put it out in a big way. Maybe we just want to send a summary of it out. But I think at the very least, when cases are being settled that are brought to the Civil Rights Commission, we ought to be aware of what happened there.
Are you referring to like learning information about the parties to the case? And
well, I think there ought to be a summary of, this. Someone submitted that said this happened, and the counter response was this. Doesn't have to be real long, but just enough so that when I'm confronted with this, I get confronted about a lot of things from this commission on the street. People figure out I'm on this commission, and then they want to bend my ear. Well, I think one of the things I'm saying is, at least in this instance with these reports, one way or another, we ought to understand what's going on in that hearing. We have an oversight, and we ought to have the information so that we say, okay, I understand that's what happened, and we're comfortable with what's going on there.
I think what you're describing is ex parte communication, where someone is contacting you in your role as a quasi-judicial official to influence your opinion on their case, which would be
no, their case
inappropriate.
was already resolved.
We don't you're using the term hearing, but it's a mediation. We don't participate in the mediation. So, and anything that is discussed in the mediation remains confidential. So we don't participate in those to know, what one person said back to the other one as far as a retort.
Well, I don't need all that.
Okay. Generally what we do is it's on the director's report, and then I give kind of the allegations that were made and that it resolved.
Hey, this is Mike Guster. Anytime anybody's writing a check for some type of wrong they have done, arbitrarily have a problem with the process. Now, if they got a problem with the process, I think they ought to come back and file a complaint. And that's where we can get down to the nitty gritty about what's going on with the process or something. So, when you're in negotiation and you're allowed to bargain with each person in these sessions, and you come to an agreement, it appears to me that what is taking place is that you're saying that, hey, I want to write this check so that I don't have to go any further and maybe adhere to some further punishment and things of this nature. I understand what you're saying, Richard, about wanting to know the process, but short of it being the person that's filing the complaint that has had some type of wrong done to them, I can't really see where we need to get down into the nitty gritty of that, especially with a company that's writing a check for some wrong of some sexual problem that they've had in their company.
Well, and it does seem, as you say, Mike, that, if parties have mediated, then they agreed to that. So, and for us to be commenting on any particular case is not appropriate, whether it's closed or not.
Absolutely.
I don't think so. So Latrice, I guess I'm hearing if you could provide just a tiny bit more by way of explanation of, I guess, what the problem complained of was. If that isn't too much, then I guess, would that satisfy you, Richard?
Yeah, just so we have a basic idea of what's going on there.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just say something too, and I think, you, Latrice, and I would kind of talked about it before. If, you're at a grocery store and and you're approached by somebody about any case that's happening, you know, civil rights case, we should just refer them back to the office because, you know, we're not even allowed to,
Absolutely.
you know specific information about those. So just to be safe, I would just refer them back to the Civil Rights Commission office.
Yep. Anything further on that or anything else in the report? I just wanted to ask Latrice, you mentioned in your report that you're continuing to monitor the COVID incidents. And I mean, are you looking at a COVID positivity rate below which you would consider reopening the office, or what's your thinking along those lines?
We've been looking at the number of cases that we see in Scott County, and they continue to go up.
Yeah.
And we don't have a mask mandate within City Hall. So people can come in and out, and there's kind of no real monitoring or controlling the flow of people coming to the office.
Do you mean the city, Latrice? Like the city
Yeah.
does have a mandate of like community members walking in the office?
Yeah, so like I've been talking to other agencies, and they require people to have their temperature taken before they enter the building. They require a mask at the door. So if you don't have on a mask, you need to put on one before you enter the building. And we don't have that yet. So we were attempting to wait for rates to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And we just continue to see either a steady increase or,
Yeah.
So just FYI, I was going to the health department at one time. Their double doors are closed, and they don't take anybody walk-in. You have to, you know, set an appointment to be able to see somebody in there. So is that just that specific building policy? Is that not citywide? I guess not citywide if that's what's happening in the other, you know. So.
Yeah, that's their policy for their building. And so what we were initially planning to do was have that for our office, but then that would require staff to interact with the person before they would have to interact with them to tell them to wear a mask or to hand them the mask to put on. So it still took us right back to the same issue of if we're trying to restrict the interaction with people, then how do we restrict that in those circumstances? So if they're allowed to come into City Hall, we don't know that they're not wearing a mask until they get inside of the office and have already interacted with staff, and then staff has to then kind of take them to task on putting on a mask.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Latrice. And hopefully the COVID rates will start to go down soon, and we'll all be in a better place. Anything else on the director's report?
No, and what we've seen with like EOC and HUD, they are like completely at home, and they have to get permission from headquarters to go into the office. And the plan that they have is for EOC, they have all of their mail being sent to one of their employees' homes. And so that person checks mail that way. And then if there is a 2-week period where the numbers continue to decrease, then one level of staff comes back in, or no, one level of staff is notified that they will be coming back to work in 2 weeks. And then if the next 2 weeks it continues to go down, those people then go in, and then 2 weeks later the next level of staff, and then 2 weeks later the next level of staff. That's if there's a continued decrease over those periods. But we just so we were trying to follow kind of those best practices that we see with our counterparts, but it's just, I mean, it just continues to increase.
Yeah.
I don't know. As a public health professional, the only way it's going to go down is mass testing and mask mandate. If we don't have that, it's hard to police the public.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
Anything further on the director's report? If not, then I think we are at old business. And the email format, this is something we have discussed through time. And the question is whether people can be allowed to use the provided city email account or must use a different account. Ruby checked with Corey Smith, the head of IT for the city of Davenport, and the following statement was provided to Ruby. The use of City of Davenport email service is a required means for electronic communication for all city departments, Civil Rights Office, and is highly suggested for the commission as well. Third-party email services like Gmail, Hotmail, and etc. are not secure and may not comply with FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. I would never recommend using these services for sensitive communications, as these can be easily hacked. IT complies with FOIA requests for all its departments with the oversight of the legal department. No emails or email accounts are accessed or search requests granted without the express permission of the legal and HR departments. All search requests are reviewed by legal and redacted by legal for content, case info, social security number, etc. before release. We maintain a secure environment for sensitive data and communications, and they take a proactive approach to security, etc. So
I would like to point out the legal department doesn't have any business looking at our email, so that would not be an appropriate thing under our contracts for the legal department to be accessing case-related emails.
Well, I guess we would cross that bridge if we ever get to it with a FOIA request, but it seems clear that the use of a city email account is certainly encouraged by the information technology director for the city of Davenport. So, and I know, Latrice, that you have indicated that we should have a policy if that's going to be the case. And I guess I would ask, do you have a policy for the office in that regard?
The staff follows the city's policy, but no other commission or board uses city email. So this is only something that's been suggested for the Civil Rights Commission. And so that's where it gets to be like a weird thing. So that's one thing, but if people are contacted, there should be some sort of rules or processes in place. So for instance, Richard is saying people are contacting him randomly that he knows about cases. So if they have his email, then are they going to email him about cases? And what are commissioners to do with that when that happens? So there should be some sort of rules in place for what happens when that inevitably happens. So when we send out emails, those are obviously on the server, and so the FOIA issue doesn't come up because it's being sent from a city email to whatever email it is. So it's there on the server. So that doesn't come up as an issue because it's being sent out that way.
Well, I would think that the policy would state that if any commissioner using a city email receives an email from a complainant or from a party to a contested matter, or really an unsolicited email from anybody, that they might have an automatic response that, as Ruby said about the grocery store, I'm sorry, I'm not expecting an email from you. If you have a question about a complaint, please contact the office, give the office phone number and email address, so that things would flow then through the office rather than directly to the commissioner. Is that what the policy should state?
I think you would have to outline that. I think that would be one instance. It could be also if they just reply that, then the staff know that that is a thing that has happened. If we receive a FOIA request for any contact we've had with, XYZ, do we then send that out to everyone who's using the city email, or how does that, I think you just need to, if that's going to be a thing, then there should be rules established for how that's going to work and what the expectations are.
I think, Ruby, maybe you and I can work on that policy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I think it's not just true for emails. I think it's true with just what Richard was talking about earlier. Do we have a policy for that?
And maybe that can be part of this policy.
City Council has established the rules of conduct for boards and commission members. And so, yes, there are rules for that.
Okay.
Well, Latrice, if you could provide me with that, and then I'll work with Ruby on formulating a policy that we can discuss at the next meeting. How's that?
That's included
Okay.
within the commissioner binder.
I'll look for it. Thank you.
Hey, can I just add a comment? If the Affirmative Action Commission and other commissions don't have city emails, and I would think Affirmative Action would be one of those commissions that really have some sensitive information as well. Why aren't they under the same guidelines? And so, as you guys discuss this and move down the road here with this, that should be a question that is posed back at the IT department. Thank you.
Well, and Mike, thank you for that. The way it was explained to me was that, we, as commissioners for the Civil Rights Commission, have a whole lot of email and a whole lot of, decision-making obligations that somebody on the Library Commission or the Library Board simply doesn't have. So and we are much more apt to be sued, the subject of a lawsuit, the subject of a FOIA request. So it's just really, we're in kind of a unique situation, I think, with respect to the amount and nature of the emails that we're apt to get. So, but we'll discuss that, Ruby and I.
Yeah, and just to give everybody a background, because I'm not sure everybody knows, the city email was not forced into me. I personally asked for it when I first got appointed as a commissioner, because at that time there was a storm happening, within the commission, and I did not want my personal email mixed with that. So that was the background on that.
Hey guys, I think all of that is great, but I still think that we need to make sure that we weigh in that question about why isn't the other commissions required to have that address, and if we could answer that, that would be great. And I clearly understand everybody's information, but I think that's important to me, and that would greatly help my understanding as we move forward. Thanks.
Well, Mike, so you do understand, nobody is suggesting that this is in any way, shape, or form required.
Okay.
That's not what we're talking about. Okay.
But I think, but Janelle, I think if we could just make sure that we get that answered, it would certainly help go a long way in seeing why or why not, and it would just help me understand the process, because the other commission, the Civil Rights Commission, the guys, I got a headache today. I'm really operating under the weather just a little bit, but the boom, 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 boom.
Affirmative action?
Affirmative action. Thanks, Kathleen. The Affirmative Action Commission certainly has some sensitive information that they will be talking about sometime, as well as a couple of other commissions as well. So I'm just throwing it out there, guys, and I think when we clear up things now, it makes for a better operating process down the road and stuff. So, and you don't have to repeat this area again when you're confronted with this type of stuff. So, thanks.
Right.
Understand. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Thanks. Looks like the next item is the special commission meeting. We have the upcoming meeting with the city council and the mayor, and we have our discussion of the policing reforms that we're working on and that we will be discussing at that meeting. And I want to especially thank Rabbi Henry Karp for all the work he did on drafting I think it was 8 proposals in the various areas that were disseminated to commission members for their review. And I want to also especially thank.
I didn't get it.
You didn't get it?
Well,
Ruby, send me your email, because I must have a wrong email address for you.
Okay.
this is the problem. So And I also want to thank Mike Guster and Lee Gaston for agreeing to meet with Chief Sikorsky and his assistant to discuss, I think, mostly the use of force reforms with them. So with that, I would open it up for a discussion. And maybe we should start, and Ruby, I will send that to you. I'll forward that to you. And Mike, if you and Lee maybe could just kind of fill us in summary fashion about your discussion with the chief and his assistant.
Okay, I'll start that off, and I'll be glad to talk to that. And while I did not get back with Lee to talk about this piece here, I'm sure he can collaborate, or he can talk about whatever things were not discussed. He can disagree with my synopsis here. But the reason why we met with Chief Sikorsky was to better understand the operation of the police department. And so what happened was that this meeting gave, I think, both of us a keen insight into the day-to-day operation and tactics within that department. We had an opportunity to talk about body cam usage and engagement, the engagement policy. We were told by the chief that body cams have to be turned on physically as the policeman or police lady gets out of the car, and that the cam on the car itself automatically comes on whenever the siren is initiated. And so we talked about the progressive disciplinary policy as it pertains to a officer who willfully does not engage his body cam, and there is specific guidance in that disciplinary process as to what will take place. Now, to me, and we didn't talk about this piece, but I think that could be probably tightened up. So without, and I don't like doing this without first telling the chief that. So we talked about qualified immunity as well. Under qualified immunity, an officer is not always able to invoke qualified immunity, in particularly when they do something that is blatant or when something they have done against police policy. And normally a judge gets the opportunity to weigh in whether or not a police officer gets qualified immunity. Again, I think there are some things that could be tightened up there. We talked about the progressive disciplinary procedures for police employees. That seems to be in pretty good tact. I was satisfied with it. Others may not be. We talked about the Juvenile Assessment Center, where the chief welcomed the opportunity to, where he would like to be able to take juveniles to this juvenile assessment center and let them work with them before they, without charging them and stuff, and let the mental health or specialists or family services personnel deal with those juveniles, so that they will not have to enter the criminal justice system with charges and things of that nature, juvenile justice system. So that's something that has to be discussed a little bit further about funding. And I can tell you, as anybody with any organization, nobody's going to want to cut their funding, but that's something that we could recommend to the city council that we take some funds, whether it's from the police department or whether it's from some other organization within the city, to fund this operation, but in the same context, we need to be working with Scott County Board of Supervisors to help supplement some of this funding for mental health and family services. So we talked about that piece of also having a mental health person even available to work with them on a call where they see that it's clearly a mental health and not a criminal offense, to try to work with that particular person or people if that would warrant that. We also had a conversation about social media in terms of disciplinary actions there, in terms of how does that work? And I can tell you that I was particularly interested in the social media posting within the police department and other areas. And so that was, again, back to the progressive disciplinary procedures. And I can tell you that we do know, and I won't discuss any action that he told us that we're taking, but social media posts by policemen, their counterparts, when it proves to be appears to be just a mere appearance, that is something that is not that would be in the best interest of the city or the public, is looked at is frowned on very, very, very much. And so while he did not go into a particular case, he did mention some instances and stuff, some events and stuff. So I felt good about that. And so the overall conversation, I thought, was a very healthy conversation. And for me personally, these are the kind of conversations I like to have out of the public eye, because one, it gives you an opportunity for everybody to talk freely. It gives you an opportunity to hear and to speak to particularly instances without somebody wanting to call you whatever, or even question your credibility or whatever, which is something I won't allow anybody to do without some type of facts. And so I think the meeting, I know the meeting was very productive, and it went a long way in reestablishing some relationship with the police department. Now, Lee, if I said anything that you think that the chief didn't say, I would ask that you weigh in and speak to that, but he certainly can collaborate or either deny my comments. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to what Mike said. I don't disagree with any of his description of the conversation, which was fairly wide-ranging. The Assistant Chief Bladel, I believe he pronounces his last name, was also present, although he deferred to Chief Sikorsky for most of the conversation. Indeed, it was a fairly friendly conversation. I don't think Mike or I went in for this first interaction, at least, intending to be adversarial or confrontational. I think the point Mike made about the reallocation of resources item on our list of concerns, we posed the question in a non-confrontational way. We said, if resources were no object, what would you rather have other experts doing than having your officers do? And he mentioned those three things that Mike noted, which is social worker availability, I think 24/7, the juvenile assessment capability, whether we end up with a center or not, and the dedicated mental health resource. He did point out one thing that I'm not sure Mike touched on, maybe you did briefly, but that was of interest to me, and that is there's a task force. Given that some of those reallocation items really traditionally fall to the county budget, i.e. social work and mental health, he said there's some sort of task force or group that I don't think is the same as the Citizens Advisory Panel that includes LULAC, NAACP, City of Bettendorf, and Scott County, and the Davenport Public Schools, I believe, are involved, as well as the police force, are underway in response to the concerns of this year that have arisen. And that's something that I think the Civil Rights Commission, one of the commissioners, it would be valuable to the commission to have one of the commissioners be present, if not on that committee or task force, to at least be able to listen in as they discuss it, because some of the challenges that need to be met obviously are going to require different levels of government to work very cooperatively. But I think it was a positive first conversation, certainly, and the proof will be in the pudding as we go forward. Do we see meaningful reform? The chief did say toward the end of the conversation that he thought this was the best opportunity for meaningful reform that he had experienced in his career. And I took that as meaning that he's at least open to some reform. But again, proof will be in the pudding. And I think we definitely need to continue the conversations and the participation of the Davenport Civil Rights Commission as one of the parties pushing to make things better. That's all.
Well, thanks very much, Mike and Lee. So do people want to now look at the proposals that Rabbi Karp has put together? And I guess the question becomes, if we're going to have written proposals with respect to what came out of the meeting with Chief Sikorsky and Assistant Chief Bladel, who is going to put those together? And Mike and Lee, so were there like 5 things, would you say, the camera issue, qualified immunity, progressive discipline, the juvenile assessment center, social media, progressive discipline, the task force, and I guess maybe reallocation? I don't know how you would.
We have one on reallocation.
Yeah. Specifically with respect to these issues, but is there somebody willing to work on putting something together in writing? I mean, if it's our intention to have written proposals to provide at the meeting on the 21st, then I would think we would need to have a way to make that happen.
Let me comment. Mike, thank you very much, and Lee, thank you very much for having this meeting and for going into such depth with the police chief. One issue that's not on your list, Janelle, is use of force policy. That needs to be on that list also. Mm-hmm. Now, Mike, the more I listen to you talking about this, the more convinced I am that you're the person to write that recommendation. On our list of topics from the last meeting, there's a topic demilitarizing the police. I don't think this is really demilitarizing the police, but this is a proposal about policing practices and policies. And it should talk about what the police is doing well, what the police is working on, and what the police need to do better. And you and Lee have a far better handle on it after that meeting to write that type of proposal than if you just sent me the message and you sent me the information and I wrote it. But it should, it needs to have think it needs to have what they're doing well, as I say, doing well, because we have to give the police credit. We should be giving the police credit for what they're doing well. We should be giving the police credit for what they're working on to improve. But we also need to talk about what else needs improvement. Would you be willing to do that, Mike?
I'm not gonna do it alone. I can tell you what I will do, Henry, is I'll work with another commissioner to do that, or one of those two ways, or the director and stuff, and get that done. So I don't think that. Well, let me ask you. Let me just make sure that I'm clear on what you're asking. What are you asking me? You asking me just to write one proposal?
One proposal on policing practices and policies based upon your meeting with the police chief. That's to say, so that, because we need to address things like body cameras, and we need to address use of force. We need to address all those things that you listed. And we need to acknowledge where the police has already addressed those issues. These are issues that are concern for the public, like use of force policies, knee to neck, chokeholds. We need to address. We need to let the public know in our proposal, where these things stand, and if we're recommending that they have to go further. As you said, some of these things you felt needed to go further.
Well, I certainly don't have a problem with it. I think I understand what you're talking about in that particular policing practices and stuff. So I can do that one and stuff. I was just kind of misunderstood what you were asking. So I'm good with that.
If you need me, okay. If you need me to help you on that, I'd be willing to. But
I'm good. Latrice was going to say something. Go ahead, Latrice.
I think it might be helpful for, rather than trying to develop specific proposals that might be outside of our personal knowledge, maybe it would be good to develop proposals to develop a proposal. To say, we want you to engage a task force made up of people from this area, this area, this area, this area, and they will get together and draft a proposal, or they will review, like for instance, the use of force policies. We say, what we saw was there was a presentation given at council, and we said, we don't use knee to neck, we don't do this, we don't do that. But then we get information from members of the public that says, yes, you do. So that could either be a disconnect between the chief knowing what individual officers are doing. It could be a disconnect between officers knowing what the policies are and what they are required to do in response to those policies. It could be a myriad of issues, but it would be helpful for people who have that knowledge and experience to give input into what kind of changes could be made as far as developing a policy to address that and how to strengthen it. So I guess that's something to think about.
I think Lee made a very good point when that I kind of left out of the brief, is that when the chief talked about them working with the NAACP, LULAC, the two mayors within the Bettendorf and Davenport, as well as the Davenport Education Association chair or president, and a couple other people that are on this panel, a couple of the Quad City Pastors Association, Churches United, and a couple of other group people, and I think that would be they did kind of recommend that we probably should have a chair at that table, at least one of our members from this commission. But I think that we can go ahead and submit the proposals anyway and stuff, and they pretty much gonna leave it with these guys here anyway, so and see where we get with this other seat at the table with this group here as well.
I think I know where the truth is coming from. And my years of writing policy, there's always a disconnect between the written policy and the implementation. So, I don't know, if you know, you're going to write this, it might be also good to use the minutes from the last public meeting to kind of, I don't know, compare what they said they have a policy on, and then a couple of, you know, complaints that we've heard from the public. So.
Absolutely. Good point.
So Mike, I know you're going out of town, and I don't want you to I don't want you to feel overburdened. So I would encourage you to ask for help from Rabbi Karp or Lee or anybody in putting this together. You're not feeling well either, I know. So
well,
I write all the time.
And Ruby as well. Yes, many hands make lighter work.
Janelle, I can tell you guys, if you want it before the 24th or the 20th of this month, you guys may want to get somebody else, because my plate is full the rest of this week with some other things, and my wife and I are leaving town on Friday.
Right. That's why I said what I said. I don't want you to take that. And I don't know, what is the sense of the commission? I mean, are we looking to have something drafted by our meeting on the 21st?
Well, that was the goal.
Yeah, that is the goal. So Lee, you were in on the discussion with the chief and his assistant. Would you feel comfortable trying to work with Ruby and Henry on putting this stuff in a proposal form?
I'm certainly willing to. Mike, I'd like to have a chance to talk with you sometime in the next day for a little bit, just to kind of share the bones, you know, of what we both said in this meeting, and strip it down to something that would fit into a written proposal. But yes, I would be willing to do that. And Mike, maybe you and I can talk a little later after the meeting today and just find a chance to spend, you know, 20 minutes or so and get the bullet points down.
That sounds good, Lee. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, great. I'll give you a call a little later this afternoon. Thanks.
Okay,
And
thanks.
then, I'll put something together as a working discussion document that I can share with the other commissioners. And then they can edit or further develop it as is appropriate.
Well, thank you so much, Lee and Mike, again, for all you have done and continue to do on this very important issue. So I think we are now back to the proposals that Rabbi Karp has provided, and I would open it up for discussion on those. Henry, do you want to kind of take them one by one and just talk a little bit about?
Yeah, let's talk. Yeah, but you know, just a preview. You know, from all the topics we discussed at the last special meeting, there, as I wrote in my email when I sent out the proposals to the members of the commission to review, I did not write a proposal on safe housing, because that is beyond the purview of policing reform. And I did not write a proposal on care, not control, because that was more or less found in the proposal on reallocation of funds. But the other proposals, yeah, we can go through those other proposals. I'd like to do them one at a time. So, and Latrice has been willing to put them up on the screen. So I guess whichever one Latrice puts up on the screen, we'll discuss first.
Well, you can tell me which one to put up and I'll just put it up as you go.
Okay, well then, let's start out with the proposal for a responsive and safe system for the filing of complaints.
Is that what it's saved as?
It's called, well, I mean, that's the title of it, but yeah, what the actual file is called by Word, because it's too long for Word. I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure it's a shortened version of that.
Oh, okay, I see it.
Okay.
Is it sharing now?
Yeah, it's sharing. It's sharing. Briefly, yeah, I'm not gonna, well, that's really kind of foggy. It's better. Briefly, I won't go into the whole introductions, so well written as they are, of these proposals, but what's going on?
I'm sorry, I was trying to make it so that it goes to the whole screen.
Okay.
Is that better?
To me, it looks the same. Yeah, okay. Then now it's too big because it gets buried underneath the sidebar.
Now?
A little bit smaller. Ah, that's it. Okay.
All righty.
Based upon the reports we received in your listing sessions and in the public meetings, it seemed that when it came to complaints, they were in, they're like basically two categories. One, the first category is complaints that are filed and at least appear not to be followed up. People say that I file a complaint and I don't hear anything about it. And I said, this issue may simply be a matter of poor communication, which can be easily remedied, or it may be the result of a lack of follow through on the part of the police department, which constitutes a more serious problem needing to be addressed. And then the other element on complaints is the reluctance of people to file complaints for fear of retaliation by the police or by the individual officers. By the way, this is also an issue which is addressed in the document we'll see later, which is the Des Moines Ordinance on Unbiased Policing, because obviously this was something that they identified about retaliation. So here are the recommendations that I put forward. Communications between the police department and complainants must be improved. Complainants should receive a written confirmation of the receipt of their complaint with a description of the process by which their complaint will be addressed. After the complaint has been addressed, the complainant should be notified with as much information as the law or personnel policies allow. So that we open up that communication and we show that and we document that the complaints have been addressed. Then the second recommendation is, while there are those who may argue whether the fear of police retaliation is a legitimately founded fear, the very fact that the fear exists and is shared by so many members of minority communities is indisputable. Therefore, it indicates that there is a need for a revision of the system of filing and addressing complaints to further assure the public that those who file complaints can do so with the assurance that they will be safe from any form of police retaliation. Such an assurance should include provisions for disciplinary actions as set forth in the established departmental policy should any officer attempt to retaliate against the complainant. That's recommendation, that's one recommendation. Any discussion on it? Any? No one has any comments on other, or any changes or do you, then I guess we should vote on it. Do we accept this as one of our recommendations? So.
All those in favor, I mean, I don't know that we need is there a motion to approve this proposal for the filing of complaints?
I move.
So this will be part of our recommendation. Are we
Yeah.
going to include, Lee and, Mike's, written recommendations as well?
No, we
Yeah.
won't have them by then, so we're gonna have to go into that meeting without those having been technically
second.
approved.
So do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I would just make one comment that I'm fine with the language. I think it's clear and concise. I do think that there is the bigger issue, which may be addressed later in our discussion about some kind of civilian review process that we've seen in other cities. And obviously that's more of a hot button issue, I suspect, with the police and the labor union, but I don't want to let go of that and just stop with what Henry's put in here.
Yeah, that's
Lee?
that's number 6, I think.
Lee, have you read through the proposals? Because there was a whole proposal about that.
Well, I think, I do not believe I received it either, Henry. And there's been a bad email address that got into the system for me.
Well,
So-
if you would send me your email, a good email address, I will.
Yep, I'll do it right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, so then, where did Janelle go?
Well, I was just gonna send Lee the proposals. So I don't think is there any more discussion on this proposal?
Are we clear about who this complaint is filed with?
Yeah, complaint is filed, complaints have been filed with the police department,
Should we say the police department, the City of Davenport Police Department?
City of Davenport Police Department, okay.
But is this like internal affairs, or is this? Is this to the proposed civilian review board, or is this to the internal affairs department, or is it to someone else?
Bye-bye, Carp, you're muted.
Okay.
Right now, there is no civilian review board, so it has to go to the police department for disciplinary action. So let's say someone has threatened retaliation or has actually taken retaliation. An officer has actually taken retaliation. Right now, it has to go to the police department. If a civilian review board is approved and set up, then it can go to the civilian review board. But we have to deal with the reality of the moment, which is complaints against police have to go to the police department for disciplinary action.
Well, maybe we should put / civil, the review board in there, and that kind of, the civilian review board, in there / civilian review board, Davenport Police Department / civilian civil review board.
Okay, I've made a note on that, okay?
But that's not in existence yet.
It's not in
Yeah, but it's
existence.
not,
It's not in existence, right, exactly. But then,
what I can say is, I can put it in the title. Complaints to the department, Davenport Police Department, / civilian review board, then if established.
yeah,
Okay.
and then I think I'll let it go at that, but I got
Okay.
a thought process, so, but.
All right, can we vote on this?
Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded to approve this proposal. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I believe it is unanimously approved. On to number 2.
Okay, the second one is, proposal for the reallocation of police funding. I'm not going to go through this whole introduction. You can read it for yourselves. It's all background material. The approach to defining what does it mean by defunding the police as we understand it. So therefore, the Davenport Civil Rights Commission recommends that there be a reallocation of a portion of police funding to, and here, then the rest of it. Social service agencies such as Family Resources to increase the availability of social workers and counselors to relieve officers who find themselves on calls that require intervention and counseling rather than law enforcement. B, mental health, addiction, and homeless programs so that they can provide more readily accessible services to those individuals in need of them encounter in the line of duty. C, restorative justice programs and programs which seek to address the school to prison pipeline. D, various programs in minority communities that are working to positively address the conditions in their communities which contribute to the unrest and inequities which drive some of their residents to crime. E, the Davenport Civil Rights Commission to increase its capacity to provide more hearings for civil rights complaints and by so doing, lessen the racial tension in the community. Now, Mike, you had another one recommendation in your report about funding. And I think it was to the juvenile intervention program.
Juvenile justice, juvenile
Assessment Center?
assessment center. Create a juvenile assessment center to work with, to assess.
The chief was careful, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Lee.
I was going to say, the chief was careful to make a distinction. He said, I could use a juvenile assessment resource whether we end up with a center or not. So he didn't want to tie the availability of somebody with expertise in that being available to assign to situations to where we end up with having a physical center. And I think that's it may be a subtle but important distinction, I think, given where we're at right now in the politics of the city of Davenport.
Okay, so maybe we should refer to it as a juvenile assessment resource program.
Yeah.
Would work? And what's the, and
I think, oh, go ahead.
what would its function be?
Would it be to divert at-risk youth from the criminal justice system?
How about that? I like that.
I think it might be helpful to learn exactly what the Juvenile Assessment Center does prior to adding it in as a recommendation, because I think that there has been a lot of discussion about it in the public that doesn't necessarily align with the actual purpose of the Juvenile Assessment Center. And I've had some conversations with one of the people who is kind of helping plan the Juvenile Assessment Center, and what their description of it was does not align with what is being described to us, and it doesn't, and what has been described to us doesn't necessarily align with how those are structured throughout the nation. So we have them kind of around the country, but it's not a system that the police are as involved in as we are hearing here. It's a system kind of like in that there are people there who are, there's availability of social workers and counselors who might be available to help kids who are having problems and kind of provide support and resources before they ever get into trouble. It's not a diversion program. They haven't gotten into trouble yet. They need assistance, and there are things that could happen that could end up taking this child or family down the wrong path. So I think it might be helpful if we include that to actually explain, for people to know exactly what that means, and to have something concrete about what the purpose of that would be prior to us endorsing it. Also, I think we maybe don't want to name specific entities to give funding to within the recommendation. So us included, even though I would like additional funding, I don't know that we should have family resources specifically as an entity to give funding to.
Latrice, I agree with you about the social services thing within the Juvenile Assessment Center, but that is exactly what we talked about, Leah and I, with Chief down there, and I think it's up to us and other individuals to make sure that that's how we reshape that Juvenile Assessment Center, is to have those entities in there, mental health and counseling, and where they intervene actually before a child even gets to the teenage level or anything like that there. So for instance, you could have a child that may get looked at in the second, third, or fourth grade and may be having problems, and they take a total look at all the external factors that may be that child is involved in, maybe family issues, it may be mama don't have a job or daddy don't have a job, or they just need plain counseling or something to help them move them along. Different type of scenarios and stuff where this particular family services, and I'm using family services, I could be using YAP, Youth Advisory Program, that will work with these people, these individuals on a personal level 24/7. So that's, when I talk about Juvenile Assessment Center, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The part that's going to help a child, that's going to help a person from a total concept of family, house, and other things that might be going on that's affecting them in their daily lives.
If I may speak. So, because my background is more on healthcare, every time we're trying to, put money into a program, we always do a quality assurance process. So we try the new process into a small amount, a small number of people, see if it works, see if it didn't, or see what might need to be tweaked for it to be successful. I'm scared though that if we say, okay, we allocate this amount of funding into this program, and then that program doesn't end up working, that funding, that reallocation has just gone to waste. So maybe we can do some type of quality assurance process, making sure that, that proposal will work for us.
Hey, Ruby, great point. Let me just tell you that the Family Resources has taken what the Youth Advisory Program has done down in Chicago and other major metropolitan areas within the United States. And I can tell you it's very well documented and it works. And so what they have done is taken their plan and they want to implement that same plan, and they have sent counselors to be trained on the same plan that YAP has, and it has already proven facts, everything that needs to be done, reevaluated, and I can tell you that there is scientific data that supports it, and so it works.
I think this proposal needs to be grounded in fiscal reality, and I don't see that here yet. There are a lot of agencies we've been talking about. There's one thing we don't, there are at least two things we don't know, which are key. One thing is we don't know the total cost of what we're proposing. We don't know the individual parts of what it's going to cost. And we don't know if funds are even available, or if by taking away the money from what they're being budgeted for now, what effect that will have. This is a proposal that deserves more consultation and coming together so that it's realistic in terms of what it intends to do, and that the financial resources are there to do it. I cannot support this until we put some work behind it and some research to make sure that everybody's on board and that the costs are realistic and that the funding is there.
Richard, this is Mike again. I can tell you once again, I just clearly stipulated that this concept has been looked at by the Scott County Board of Supervisors. The money that is needed to support this program is is about $800,000. And so what we have done, the Juvenile Justice Coalition has worked with one of the Scott County supervisors in particular, and to make sure that we know what the costs are. And I can tell you that as a individual of color here, we have far too long kicked this can down the bucket. And I can tell you that we need this program, not yesterday, but years ago, to come in and assess and help and do some things to help out children of color, because this is who it affects mostly here. And I can tell you the data, the money, and where we need to get the info from, and who we worked with is already on solid foundation. And it's time for Scott County and the city of Davenport to get the money, period.
Yeah, I have to say, from a lifetime of serving as a rabbi, I had one of the pieces of wisdom I have acquired is that you can tell a person's, an organization's, a community's, a nation's true priorities by looking at where they spend their money.
Thank you.
They spend their, and yeah, it's not for us to worry about where, whether or not the city has got the money and the county has got the money or is willing to spend the money on the recommendations that we make. We place those recommendations before them because we think that these services and these actions and these changes are important. And we believe that these are priorities that the community should have. So then they have to affirm that these are the priorities the community should have, find the funding for them. And if they choose not to set these as priorities, then they reap what they sow. And that would be horrible. We've seen it in Minneapolis. We've seen it in Atlanta. We've seen it in Kenosha. You know, are we going to see it here in the Quad Cities? If the city decides, no, we don't want to take care of our people, we don't, yeah, it's cost us too much, then we will find it here.
So are there specific, I guess I've heard a suggestion that maybe that such as family resources be deleted from A.
Yeah, I've already deleted it,
Okay,
but I am just going to delete the Davenport Civil Rights Commission from E because we're the only, you know. But I would appreciate it if Mike, if you would send me the wording for, or at least send me the concept of the juvenile. Maybe we won't call it juvenile assessment, but juvenile advisory and resource program, something like that. But what you think it should be doing, and I will create that language for the proposal if you would do that.
But Henry, I don't think it matters what we call it. I think that it does matter how we outline it and how we specify what we really want within that particular center is the key ingredient that is needed. And so if we want to rename it, that's fine. I don't care. Yeah. But I still think they get an opportunity to reshape it and make it what they want. So I think we have to clearly outline what we want in that particular center.
Well, you said it. You said it very well. But if you could just kind of like email me what that vision is, I will put that into the proposal. The
I'll give it to you.
Okay. Any other discussion on this proposed recommendation?
well, so it seems that we probably won't be able to vote on this one now because there's going to still be something added. So I guess it would be more along the lines of what will be added later. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think we can vote upon it now because Mike has shared what the vision that he talked about, and yeah, it's going to be, yeah, and we have to, if we can vote upon it, yeah, having good faith that what Mike talked about will find its way into here, because we're not going to meet again before the 21st, then our special meeting for the housing case, which is going to take up enough of its time then. So I would say that we vote upon this, trusting that the language that it will be reframed as that's my opinion. Because if we don't, it's not going to get before the city council on the 21st, and it may never get before the city council after that.
Well, but it might be in the same status as the policing proposals that are going to come.
Well,
from Lee and Mike. And in fact, maybe that could just be, I mean, it arose out of their discussion with the chief. So maybe it ought to be just in with what Lee and Mike and Ruby come up with. What do you think about that, Mike and Lee?
I would agree with Henry. I think we ought to go ahead and approve it. We know the framework for which we're going to reshape it here, and if it's not where we want it, we can. I mean, I believe that the framework for which we are talking about is very clear, and we can vote with the necessary corrections being made to the proposal.
So I'm hearing that the only specific change is to delete such as family resources from A, and that there will be the addition of F, which will be the juvenile assessment resource piece, which you have heard discussed in some detail. And so I guess
I
I
would
would,
just make one point, and that is, you know, we're not elected officials. We are not a funding body. The important thing is to tee this up to try to structure the public conversation going forward in as effective a way as possible to get where we want to be. And I think if we address the juvenile assessment resources without having to describe necessarily exactly how they're defined at this point, it puts it on the agenda for that conversation going forward with the public bodies that will allocate the resources.
and is there any discussion about E? I mean, do we feel it's somewhat self-serving to include more funding for ourselves from police funding, or do we feel that this is exactly the priority that Rabbi Karp has mentioned that should be emphasized by our elected officials? Is there any discussion on that?
Well, I would certainly have taken into consideration what the director has said about this funding, but I'm gonna have to agree with Rabbi Cobb to leave the Davenport City Rights Commission in there.
Any other thoughts on that?
And maybe we should include in, for the, where we're talking about addiction and social services harm reductionists, because they do handle things a little differently than social workers maybe would.
So, I'm sorry, Latrice, were you suggesting adding harm reduction programs to B?
Harm reductionists, like people, like social service, say just social workers.
Reductionist?
Yeah. So in the social workers, harm reductionists, and counselors.
Okay.
So what do we say? Harm reduction is. And,
Yeah.
well, we have social workers and counselors in A. So.
They're a little different. They do
Harm reduction. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Latrice, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. So they work with people who have substance abuse issues. So they help with drug-related things, because a lot of times there's a stigma associated with that, and so unless people are specifically trained to deal with people with substance issues, they don't necessarily treat it with the most care.
Okay, Latrice. So, I mean, we have mental health, addiction, and homeless program. Would it be, yeah, those would include counselors, okay? Yeah, so, but would you like me to change addiction to substance abuse?
No, I meant in A. So you have it in B that they are dealing with addiction. So in A, you're listing out the people who would deal with it, right?
No, okay. So, yeah, so I understand what you're saying. Social workers and counselors, you see, I think in A, I'm listing more that they can immediate resources, that they you're on a call, that they get a call and they find that they can, that what's needed here more is a social worker or a counselor, that they could, so bring that onto the call to deal with them more immediately.
Right.
By the intervention, and in B, it's more long-term.
And the harm reductionists, that's what they do. They would be there to intervene immediately, and they have that kind of lived experience where we've had people be on our Breakthrough Series collaborative team, which is for foster care, but we've had people who have dealt with substance abuse issues, and then they can give us greater insight into how to handle it when we're interacting with people. And they also, that's what harm reductionists do for the law enforcement purposes. So let's say someone is, I don't know, maybe in a psychosis because of a substance, they would be available as an immediate person to help the same way a social worker or counselor would. And maybe they would handle it differently than a social worker or counselor would.
The only
Okay,
concern-
I have no problem adding harm reductionists to this list of, like, you know, social workers and, yeah, I have no problem with that if the commission agrees, yeah.
The only concern I have is that it makes it sound like social workers and counselors are not harm reductionists, which I think they are. I would suggest maybe social workers, counselors, and other harm reductionists to relieve. Does that make sense?
Is that communicating what you're looking at, Latrice?
I don't know that's how that's defined in the scope of that work. But it seems like, I mean,
You're saying that there are specific counselors that are called harm reduction,
yes,
correct?
yes.
So then. I
It
think
might
that-
not be a counselor or a social worker. They are someone who has that lived experience who works in that field.
Okay. So how about social workers, counselors, and, yeah. And
Yeah.
was that, if that is, yeah, does that work for everybody?
I'm good.
Anybody have a problem with that?
It's 2:15, just saying.
Yeah, that's right. I have one other point I want to make, despite the fact it's 2:15 and I've got to exit by 3, but this is really more of a political concern, but it occurred to me as I was looking at this, that what we're proposing here is that we reallocate a portion of the police budget to these items. I feel like these items are so important that whether or not the public officials are willing to reallocate from the police budget, I would like to see them done, even if it has to come from other kinds of general
Yeah.
funding.
Yeah.
And we could be falling into a trap here because we're in a period where there's likely to be considerable civil unrest, hopefully not locally, but we don't know. And I think the political environment for funding this, if we sort of tie it to taking out of the police budget, actually hurts our cause. I don't object if we can see it by reallocating the police budget to do these things, but we're asking for some pretty major things here. And back to the point Henry was making in response to Rich, this is really a cry out to our elected officials as to what priorities need to be. And whether the funding comes from the police budget, it comes from other existing general funds, or comes from increasing taxes, which would be probably even less popular than taking it from the police budget. Nonetheless, I think we should be making the point that these things ought to be done. It's right and it's just. And so I don't know if we want to change the wording on this at this late point, but it just feels like a little bit of a political trap as we head into this fall and winter.
What if we we add a statement under like 2, there is no number 2, and we make a number 2, and the number 2 is if funding for these programs cannot be drawn reallocated from police funding, that the community, that the city find other means to fund them.
Yeah, or we could change the number 1. There'd be a reallocation of funding.
Yeah, I don't object to that, Henry. I just wanted to kind of point out that we might be setting ourselves up to get trapped if we restrict it, the police funding, which the literal wording of this does.
Oh yeah, well, there is the issue the issue of reallocating police funding is not going to go away. Yeah, the defund police is not going to go away. So we need to make a statement about we're not taking all the money away from the police, but we want to see some of that funding reallocated to non-law enforcement programs. Yeah, but so I think that we have to, I think it's important to make that statement, but we can say as well that these programs, whether they come out of police funding or not, are important programs that should be funded.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make that point as you do well in the first paragraph. But if we drop the word police, and I don't know, was that Latrice that you said that?
Yeah.
Somebody said it. If we drop the word from police in the title and in number 1, it sort of leaves it open to saying, okay, let's do it anyway. So, but I don't want to draw this out. I know we're concerned about time, but I thought it was worth making that point.
This is Mike, and I'm gonna be real quick. I think you make a very valid point, Lee, and and I'm gonna be right up front with you guys. It doesn't make a difference whether it comes out of police funding or some other city funding to me and stuff, because I'm looking at Davenport, and I'm not looking at other major metropolitan areas where they have a big budget. I know we got a big budget here with the police department as well. As a matter of fact, they spend more money on policing than they do anything else. But I won't let the city determine where they're gonna get the money from. And then if they don't want to do that, then that's, well, we can look at the police department and we can get funding from there. So I don't want to tie ourselves into a corner either and stuff. So, but other than to say that I agree with what Lee has said, and we could we could definitely change item number 1 to say there will be reallocation of city funding to Davenport City funding to for A, B, C, D, E.
Well, how about, I mean, we can very simply change the title to reallocation of police and city funding, and
Okay.
police and city funding in one.
I agree with that, Henry.
I like it.
Yes, sir.
And that way, these first 2 paragraphs can stay in and still make sense.
Right.
Any other changes, additions, deletions, corrections, discussion? And bear in mind that this is with the inclusion of F regarding the juvenile assessment resource. So all those in favor of that, I guess in principle, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, I'm opposed.
Okay, Richard, you are noted. And I will note that Ruby has left and I am attempting to take notes. So that passed 5-1. On to the next one.
Okay, it deals with school resource officer.
Is it sharing on the screen?
It's sharing on the screen.
Yep.
This may be our least popular proposal out in the community. Basically, it's based upon the fact that we really have not been dealing with the issue of the resource officers, and we haven't gotten feedback until the public meeting. We didn't get any in the listening session, and we basically haven't gotten enough information on this matter to actually make hardcore recommendations. So, not feeling that we are sufficiently informed on the issues concerning school resource officers and recognizing that the City Council has established a task force to address this question, the Davenport Civil Rights Commission recommends that, one, the task force in partnership with the school district to conduct a series of fact-finding meetings with parents and community stakeholders. At least one of these meetings should be exclusively with the supporters of the program, and at least one of these meetings should be exclusively with the opponents. Two, based upon the information gathered at these meetings, a team should be established with representatives from both groups, the school district and the police department, to explore recommendations for the future of the program. Since it seems that there is an obvious problem in the manner in which some of these officers treat students of color unequally compared to their treatment of white students, if it is decided that the program is to be retained, it should undergo significant changes so that the students of color are treated equally, fairly, and with respect, and that the revised program encourages interracial harmony rather than feeds the school to prison pipeline. Earlier in the document, it talks about the fact that that from our public comments that we received, it appears that the divide on pro versus con for this program may very well be along racial lines. That in and of itself is a serious problem. In fact, it says in the paragraph before, it appears to us that there is a significant division of opinion as to whether to retain or terminate this program. Though we cannot definitively document it, it appears that the division may be primarily along racial lines. If so, that very fact stands as a strong indictment of the program, one that must be addressed.
You know, I agree that this found itself on either side. I even went on to contact friends and associates who are principals and counselors up in Michigan and down in Tennessee, and just discussing the issue. I found, you know, it's that much disagreement all over. Some who I have a high degree of respect for said, you know, they favored it, and some say they didn't. Some said it had more of an effect on minority groups. I just got all kinds of communication about it, and so I thought whoever addressed this, who wrote this proposal, did a great job of showing really how I feel.
Good job, Henry.
Thank you.
Any discussion about the specific proposals here? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve this proposal as submitted.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I would ask those in favor to say aye or raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. So that is unanimous. On to the next one.
The next one is a proposal for reforming pretrial release programs. The issue here is that bail, the whole system of bail, is dramatically discriminatory. It allows the rich to walk the streets, almost regardless of the offense that's to which they're being charged, and the poor to be to be incarcerated from in the pretrial programs until as they're tried, and that's the innocent along with the guilty. This is really problematic. Also, there are charges in the pretrial program for such things as electronic tracking devices, which the defendant must pay for, and drug testing, which the defendant must pay for, which is again discriminatory because of the costs involved. While there are other public services that out in the community that are completely supported by tax dollars. So, for the recommendations that I have put together, the option of releasing defendants on their own recognizance should be maximized by the courts. That's one. Statutes should be enacted requiring judges utilizing appropriate risk assessment tools to impose the least restrictive conditions determined to ensure that the defendant's appearance at trial and to protect the public safety, and with release on their own recognizance being the default ruling. The third is pretrial services agencies should be refocused more on providing the defendant with support than supervision. Rather than simply reporting a defendant's violation of conditions of release, which would result in the defendant's rearrest, detention, and prosecution for contempt of court, regardless of the nature of the violation, the pretrial services agencies should seek to address the violation administratively, reserving the right to invoke revocation proceedings only for violations that actually interfere with the court's function or that present a risk to public safety. And four, defendants should not be responsible for payment of any fees related to pretrial expenses. The criminal justice system serves the public good from which the entire community benefits. Like so many other systems and agencies which serve the public good, the general public good, all of its costs should be funded by the entire community through taxpayer dollars. To charge defendants for user fees, such as court-mandated drug testing and rental fees for electronic minority devices, is discriminatory against low-income defendants. Those are the recommendations.
I agree, and I also would like to piggyback on that they have to pay all of this stuff before they regain their right to vote.
Yeah.
And it may well be that much of this, is something that would have to be taken up at the state level. But it's certainly an expression of a huge problem. And, it isn't just, the user fees include, room and board while you're actually in jail, awaiting trial on a case that you might be found not guilty on.
So the person of means who can pay for bail winds up paying far less for pretrial program for the whole pretrial period than the person who's of low income who cannot afford bail, and therefore winds up paying all of these things. So that's the proposal. We any issues that people want to bring up with it, anything they want to change, or then maybe we can vote on it.
Any discussion? not, I would entertain a motion to approve it.
I
So
so move.
Ethelene moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mike, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. On to the next one.
Okay, the next one is proposal for decriminalization of low-level offenses. As Latrice brings this up on the board, you see this more often on decriminalization of marijuana, which is a low-level offense. It goes both ways in the literature. I have chosen to go with low-level offenses rather than marijuana, which marijuana is one, because marijuana isn't the only low-level offense that should be decriminalized and should be turned into a fine-only offense. Okay. The last paragraph, considering the evidence that people of color tend to receive more punitive treatment than do white commission of low-level offenses, and that such unequal treatment is a major contributor to the problem of mass incarceration, the Davenport Civil Rights Commission recommends that 1, low-level offenses no longer be considered arrestable offenses, but rather be recategorized as fine-only offenses. 2, the fines for these offenses should not be exorbitant, but rather reasonable and affordable for all members of the community. 3, if the defendant cannot afford to pay the fine, then an affordable payment program be set up for the defendant. 4, no defendant should be charged and incarcerated for civil contempt solely for failure to fully pay the fine. 5, for these low-level offenses should be classified as criminal offenses, should not be classified as criminal offenses, and should not be included in any criminal database, thereby not jeopardizing the defendant's future employment opportunities.
Rabbi Karp, the only change I would make would be that number 4, that it would read solely for the inability to fully pay the fine.
Yeah. Number 4, yeah. So it says solely for the inability.
It says failure. So I would like that changed to inability.
I agree. I will change that, and if everybody else agrees.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else? We ready to vote on this?
If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, please, if you are in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Duly noted. On to the next one.
Proposal for decentralizing decision-making. Here is where we talk about the Citizen Review Board. This is based upon a letter to the Des Moines Mayor and City Council. I drew heavily upon it from the Iowa-Nebraska the Iowa-Nebraska State NAACP Area Conference of Branches. So, so this is pulling upon their recommendations. And they basically recommend two different bodies be created, okay? So therefore, the Davenport Civil Rights Commission recommends that, one, the City Council and the Police Department institute the recommendations of the Des Moines City Council by the recommendations to the Des Moines City Council by the Iowa-Nebraska State NAACP Area Conference of Branches. Those recommendations include the establishment of a community policing practices and review committee. The purpose of this body would be to, one, provide the community with a direct and ongoing voice on how they are policed, and the authority to review unbiased policing practices, policies, practices, and procedures, strategies, operations, resource deployment, and public safety in general. And two, to provide advice and make recommendations to the police department and the city council on policy and practice matters. Then B, a citizens or civilian review board. The purpose of this body would be to hold officers accountable through a structured mechanism that ensures individual complaints of police misconduct are scrutinized and decided by a body independent of. So basically the first body, the first organization is systemic. It deals with policies and practices. And the second is for the direct dealing with complaints.
Any comments? Go ahead, Mike.
I think that is great, Ingrid. I agree wholeheartedly.
Thank you. But you can thank the Iowa-Nebraska State NAACP Area Conference of Branches.
Well, I can tell you, it's not the first time I've heard it, that's for sure.
Any further discussions, suggestions, deletions, additions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
I second.
I take it, Mike, that would be a motion to approve?
Yes.
And Ethelene to second that. Any further discussion? If not, if in favor, please signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. On to the next one.
Now this one is purely my creation, built of the moment. It's proposal concerning the presence of armed civilians, public protests and demonstrations. And the introduction says, of course, recognizes that there's a Second Amendment right to bear arms, but the fact of the matter is that there are restrictions on bearing arms. So, for example, you cannot, if there's let's say, I have it in here somewhere. For example, no one is allowed to carry a firearm into the Iowa State Capitol building, a hospital, or a polling place. I mean, these are so these areas have been restricted. So, we need to, considering all that's gone on over this summer, we need to make similar restrictions for public protests and demonstrations, because we've seen how that turns out, both in Kenosha and in Portland. Therefore, the Davenport Civil Rights Commission recommends that, one, the Davenport City Council pass an ordinance forbidding the carrying of firearms to public protests and demonstrations. Two, members of the Davenport Police Department neither welcome nor accept the assistance of armed civilians at public protests and demonstrations, ergo Kenosha. Three, the Davenport Police Department assign officers to approach any armed civilian attending a public protest or demonstration and to give them the option of A, leaving the area of the protest or demonstration, B, turning over their firearms to the Davenport to be retrieved at a later date, or C, being placed under arrest. That's the proposal.
I would make just a comment here. While I completely agree with this as a matter of public policy, I fear that the inclusion of it in what we are trying to do with our recommendations to the City Council around civil rights, it will blur the focus of that discussion and draw in people who otherwise might be inclined to not get into the discussion in a way that isn't helpful to getting the other concerns passed. So that's my fear from a political perspective, Henry. But in terms of wishing this were public policy, I would have no issue with it.
I would agree with Lee, and the Sixth Amendment issue is obviously hotly contested. But I like number 2. So maybe if we could amend this to be that they are not going to welcome the assistance of, armed civilians at protests and demonstrations, and something regulating their affiliation with white supremacist groups or Nazi organizations, or that could be something too.
I agree with Lee too as well. And while I think it's a very good proposal, it's probably not, I guess, definitely don't want it to take away from any other of the points that we've got here. So, but I tell you what, I like all of it.
Well, let me share with you my motivation for writing. Now, obviously, a big part of my motivation was what happened in Kenosha and what happened in Portland, where in Kenosha, 3 protesters were shot, 2 of them killed, and in Portland, 1 counter-protester was killed. So the shooting happened on both sides. And, I kind of had this philosophy: when you have a hammer, everything seems like a nail. And that when you pull out, when civilians, untrained civilians, and I mean not just untrained on how to shoot guns, that which got them their shooting license and their gun licenses in the first place, but untrained about intervention, and police officers are trained supposedly and hopefully how to refrain from using their weapons, how to control situations, how to deal with situations without pulling their guns out of their holsters. These civilians come with their own bias on the issue, one way or the other, and do not possess the training of law enforcement officials. Just this weekend, I was watching the TV, watching the news about the peaceful demonstration at Churchill Downs for the Kentucky Derby, and the demonstrators were all peaceful, but the very forefront of that march was a significant body of people, all of them in black uniforms and armed. If there had been a counter-protest, and if the counter-protesters had weapons, that could have been an absolute disaster. And somewhere along the line, I felt we have to say no to arms, bearing arms at public demonstrations. You bring ideas, you bring values, but when people bring arms, there's always a chance that someone's going to be shot, and we have to kind of prevent that. I mean, that's my opinion. Okay, I'm going to step away for a few moments for other reasons, but it gives you an opportunity to discuss this among yourselves and I will abide by whatever decision the commission makes. I'll be right back.
Anybody else have a comment to make? I guess what I'm hearing is, well, I think we all agree with the policy that is set forth here. There are some concerns about what the inclusion of this policy might do to the discussion, especially related to our other initiatives. And this certainly is something that can be urged upon the city council by private individuals or other groups as well. Anybody else have a comment they care to make? I don't want to vote while it looks like both Richard and Henry. Richard's back. I don't want to vote until Henry is back.
I think we just got to be careful here, and based upon what everybody has said, I just believe we ought to just leave this one off of there and stuff. People tend to get a lot rowdy when you start talking about their weapons and all this good stuff. And while I 100% agree with what Henry has written here, I just don't want to cause a further ruckus within the city here and draw more attention to the Davenport Civil Rights Commission. And so, with that said, I just think we try to do it on another forum as opposed to this one and stuff. I mean, like I said, I like the whole proposal, and we could change a few verbiage somewhere with item 2, but I just believe we got to leave this one alone for right now. I mean, when you talk about Second Amendment, you're talking about galvanizing people. I mean, I've never seen people galvanize about a weapon more than I have. I mean, I've never seen so many people that can be galvanized by one particular incident, anything more than a weapon. So, I don't want to draw any more attention to the Civil Rights Commission because of that reason, me personally and stuff. And I think the proposal is very well written, and I would like to see it tacked on to another group. And I got a group that that Henry I'd like to give it to. So that's my thought process.
Thank you, Mike. Any further discussion?
I'm all for it. We've got too many guns out there, and we don't need guns at protests, and we ought to just be really frank and upfront about it. I'm not afraid at all to be supportive of this proposal. I would do away with the Second Amendment in a moment.
Any further discussion? If not, I
move the adoption of it.
Is there a second?
I will second it because I still believe in it.
This is Latrice, sorry. We lose our captioner at 2:49.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Rabbi Karp, you seconded it. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No, for
Aye.
the reason.
Nay, I guess we would say nay.
Nay.
So that's Mike, Ethelene,
Lee is a nay.
Lee. Okay,
So it fails.
it just fails, yes. Sorry,
Okay.
it's wonderful work, and as Mike has suggested, don't don't do anything with it, and it might be put to another use by another group.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the last,
Hey, can I point out something on this one?
Well, we're done with this one, and I think we need to get on to number 8 because it's almost 3 o'clock. So I'm sorry, Richard, but we do need to move along. Next one, please.
okay, the next one, it's actually the Des Moines City Ordinance for Unbiased Policing.
About what?
One second.
Yeah, I will.
This ordinance was, it's multiple pages, so we're not gonna get them all on the screen. And it's a lot to digest. This ordinance was passed on June 22nd, 2020 by the Des Moines City Council on unbiased policing. And I think we need to present this to our city council because it does a good job of defining terms. But besides from defining terms, it has a section on dealing with complaints and compliance, and it has a section on dealing with training, and it deals with issues such as racial profiling and pretextual stops. It is a very thorough ordinance. It doesn't deal with all the things that we dealt with, but it deals with other things which we have dealt with, and other things we haven't dealt with directly in our other proposals, but which came up in our community meetings and in Latrice's listening sessions. Fair and unimpartial treatment, individual demographics, police services, racial profiling, specific subject descriptions, and it does a really good job, and I wish we had the time to actually read the whole thing here, but that's why I sent this out to you in advance, because this is a wonderful city ordinance, and one that we can actually ultimately build upon, about complaints about biased policing and racial profiling, about you see here conduct conduct a thorough investigation consistent with established citizen complaints. So you want to keep scrolling. Okay.
What are we doing? Recommending this to the city council for adoption?
I think we're recommending this to the city council for a basic format, and with many of the issues, and but I would volunteer that we could meld this ordinance with our recommendations. But
was this adopted by the city council in Des Moines?
On June 22nd, 2020, the city council adopted it.
Well, I move that we recommend it.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Well, again, Henry, thank you so much for all your work. It's just amazing what you've done here. So I guess the way things stand, we have these now 7 proposals that we'll be bringing to the meeting on the 21st. which I think is it at 5:30?
I think it's 5:30. It's
Yeah,
6:30, I
Yeah,
think.
5:30 to 6:30, so.
But it'll be
uh,
5:30 to like midnight, I guess.
Well, we'll see. But,
I hope not.
thank you for all your work, and thank you, all of you, for reviewing them. I know that we've been, working hard lately, so I appreciate all your work. So, Henry, do you feel confident that you'll be able to make the changes that we discussed to the
Well,
law?
yeah,
And
if I can get some clarification on language for the juvenile assessment program.
You'll get them.
All the other changes are,
Already done.
to be done. And
Yeah,
I can send them out to the members of the commission individually, as I did last time, so that you can see the revised version.
sounds good.
And then I would suggest that we submit the revised versions to the mayor, ASAP, so that the city council can have an opportunity to review them.
So, you'll provide those to Latrice and me, and we'll forward those along?
Yes.
Okay, great.
This item that's on the screen now is 29 pages long, right? Is that right?
Yes, this is just the agenda.
Oh,
Rabbi Karp, for clarification, is this the one that you're going to be forwarding me? Is that still a draft, or is it going to be the finalized document?
Excuse me? Can you ask that question again? I didn't quite catch.
Is that still going to be a draft, or is that going to be the finalized document?
Yeah, well, I'll be revising these according to this discussion, and I will be sending them as the recommendations. Instead of saying proposal, it will say recommendation.
and although I received everything else, Rabbi, I didn't receive the unbiased policing.
Document, they all should have been in the same email. You may have to scroll down on the attachments. Because scroll down on the attachments, because there were 8 attachments, and they were all there. Did anybody else not receive it? Because once I wrote the first letter, it was a template, and I just changed your name and your addresses. So
I'll check again.
okay, but it'll be included in the next set of the revised recommendation.
And Latrice, is it your view that it will be okay to provide that to the mayor we'll just send it to the mayor, and then it'll be up to him to decide what he wants to do with it, I guess.
We can send it out to mayor and council. I was
Okay.
just asking if I should put like a watermark of draft in the background or anything.
Yeah, I think these are good. If we voted on these, so these should be our recommendation.
Yeah, recommendation.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so anything else on the special commission meeting or the reforms? If not, then I think we are on to H, 0123022026-14. That's the meeting that will be held this Thursday. And the time for that meeting does anybody remember the time for that meeting?
It's,
Okay.
5:30.
Yep. 5:30, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Importantly, in that discussion, we might benefit from knowing what the prior commission, what their deliberations were, and I understand that there may be a recording of that. And so we need to vote on whether we should retrieve the recording if it still exists from the city clerk. So I would entertain a motion to that effect.
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? And I guess I would make clear that it would be the recording and Latrice, is it have to be the recording and something else or just a recording? Do you know?
It's an envelope that has a audio tape and the handwritten minutes from the meeting.
Okay. And have you asked that it be preserved?
No,
So ordinarily, they're only kept for a year, is that right?
I'm not sure what the process is.
Okay,
So that's something that's done in the clerk's office, and the clerk has since retired, and I think now technically the city administrator is the clerk, and then we have a deputy city clerk. So I don't have any interaction with the closed records from the commission. That the chair would take that directly to where they wanted it to go. So they took it up to them, and that's where it has been. So I would have
I'm sorry, when you say took it up to them,
to the
who's
city
them?
clerk.
The city clerk, okay.
Yeah, so I don't have any interaction with that.
Okay, well, I will attempt to retrieve it then. So we have a couple of cases here, new business.
We're losing our captioner at 3, and I haven't gotten confirmation that they can stay on the line.
Janelle, I think I mentioned earlier, I have a.
Yeah, you need to go too. Well, I guess I'm hearing that the rest of the agenda will be held over for the next meeting.
But we should still have public comment.
Yes, we will need to do that, but I'm talking about the agenda. So anything else for the good of the order before public comment? Then Latrice, I would ask you if there are any persons who wish to address us during the public comment portion.
Is it just the people who've read? Did we say what people were doing, raising their hand? It's just they're raising their hand.
They should raise their hands on the,
I guess, Kim Brown, I'm attempting
Hello?
to unmute you. Okay, there we go. Yes, we can hear you.
Ms. Brown, if you would state your name for us and where you live, please.
I don't think she hears you.
you may be muted.
I don't think she hears us.
Okay, I'm gonna remute you, Kim, if you can hear me. And then we'll move to Brian Wingert.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Brian Wingert, Decriminalized Davenport, Quad City DSA. I live in Moline. I just, travel and know people that work in Davenport. This is why I show up at the commission meetings. First of all, I just want to say, I think that the commission needs to have a full investigation into Richard Pecora and find out what he's been talking about to the public. Everybody else seems to understand that you're not supposed to have any conversations with the public about civil rights cases. And Richard not only is talking to the public about it, but he wants more information to give to them. I think that's that's a huge red flag. Someone should put up something about that and let whoever knows be aware of it and do some kind of investigating and find out who he's talked to about what, because obviously he's been talking to somebody about something, and that's very, very sensitive to, you know, the cases and everything. I mean, somebody needs to look into it. Also, there was a point about emails that came up. And my thing with the emails is I wouldn't think that you'd want the civil rights commissioners to have any city emails, because the IT person for the city email can extract anything out of them emails that he wants to, and, you know, just give it to whoever he wants to. And that's just not secure at all. That's a real unsecure thing to have. And then also there was some talk about, I think it was the very first thing that you're going to bring up in front of the city council. And I've said this very, very many times before. You cannot have the police the police. Does everybody hear how that sounds? That doesn't sound right, does it? You can't have the police the police. Stop doing that. Everybody voted on it and said, okay, that's okay. And that, just to let everybody know, that's not police reform at all. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Laura Rodriguez. I'm
Hi,
sorry.
this is Laura Rodriguez. I'm with Quad Cities DSA. I'd like to point out that it is a tactic of white supremacy to ask where we all live, when in previous meetings, I've been coming here for over a year now, and in previous meetings, I've heard many people not be asked where they live, so I just want to point that out. People live in Illinois and work in Davenport like myself, so that's a thing. Secondly, to piggyback on what Brian was talking about, I think it's a clear conflict of interest for Richard Pecora to be talking about public housing. He has a direct invested interest in ensuring that a local entity be charged with managing these properties, as he sits on the board of Ecumenical Housing. It sounds like they made a bid to try and own the properties, and if they can't own them, why? He wants a local entity to manage the properties, and I wonder why. He should have recused himself from speaking about this, because he is there in an official capacity as a commission member. So it sounds to me like he's there to serve different interests based on not only the housing issue, but also the issue of talking to people outside of the commission and being talked to on the streets by apparent sex offenders. I'm not sure what case he's talking about exactly, but it sounds to me like, yeah, this person has no business on the Civil Rights Commission. If your friends are the ones who are being held to the fire by the Civil Rights Commission as a law enforcement agency, you don't belong there. I think he should resign, quite frankly. And not only that, this directly contradicts the City of Davenport's Code of Conduct for Commission members, specifically. Members shall not use their official positions to influence government decisions in which they have a material financial interest or personal relationship, which might give the appearance of a conflict of interest. In accordance with the law, members shall disclose investments, interests, real property, sources of income, etc. Or in keeping with their roles as stewards of the public interest, members of council should not appear on behalf of the private interests of third parties before the council or any board, commission, committee for preceding the city, nor shall members of boards, commissions, and committees appear before their own bodies or before the council on behalf of the private entrance of third parties on members related to the areas of service of their bodies. I don't understand why this person's sitting on the commission. I don't understand why nothing's being done and we're pretending like it's normal. Y'all need to get it together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gina Hill.
Hello. I am commenting to request that the commission and staff research the responsibility and or obligation of the commission to cross-file complaints about discrimination in education with the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights and with the Iowa Department of Education. Both of these public agencies allow for organizations to file complaints on behalf of students when there is a discrimination complaint. I sent an email to the staff this morning with information about how to contact these agencies. I believe it would be similar to filing a complaint, as is practice with the commission when they cross-file with HUD or other agencies. And it would be, I believe, within the scope of the commission's responsibilities and possibly an obligation when you are aware that there are founded allegations of discrimination. You have a responsibility to cross-file these complaints. Although some of the issues may fall under IDEA or 504 or ADA, when there are complaints of discrimination related to disability or to race and ethnicity, gender in education that fall under the Davenport Civil Rights Code, there will be overlap between federal and state laws. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis Platt.
Hello, this is Dennis Platt. I live in Davenport in the 6th Ward. And I wanted to comment mostly about your police reform work that you've done. Today you've covered an awful lot of ground, and I guess I wanted to recognize everyone on the commission for their contribution. This is just such a big area, and it's easy for a city council to get overwhelmed by just, the sheer mass of it all. And I guess I would ask that in your recommendations, you include a cover letter outlining a time horizon for expected implementation, because it's clear, state and federal laws are going to restrict some of these changes, and maybe all the council can do is write a resolution and pass a resolution supporting some of the changes you've talked about. Maybe that's the best they can do. Other things can be done last week. There's no reason that training issues have to wait for anything. They should be going forward. There's no reason these city policy issues, like you discussed in number 1, can't be done immediately. Even with that sensitive gun issue, number 7, I think it was, there was part of that, number 2, where the police could adopt a policy refusing to accept help from local gun groups at any public forum or demonstration. There's no reason they can't do that. And I would think it's poor public policy to allow them to do that. But those things could be done right away. And I would think in a cover letter, you could kind of outline what we can do today, what's going to take a year or two, and a number of these things that require budgeting and ordinance work, it might take a year. And I think we have to be practical and realistic about that. But in any event, I guess my fear is that they'll look at this and say, well, we can't do any of it because part of it involves a federal law, so we'll write it all off. I think you need to distinguish what you expect to get done before the end of this year and what you expect to get done before the end of next year and what might take longer. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any more public comments? I would say I'm waiting to hear back from Ruby to see whether she has anything in her email. It should be just a couple of minutes.
I think Kim Brown, we ought to probably go back to her to see if.
Oh, that's a good idea, Mike. Yes, thank you. Is Kim Brown still in the meeting? Are you able to tell, Latrice?
Yes, she's still in the meeting.
Are you able to ask her whether she would still like to make a comment?
Well, no, I don't have a way to contact her. I just unmuted her though.
I'm here now if you want.
Oh, good.
I was really having a problem there with my screen. I apologize.
That's okay, Ms. Brown. Go ahead, please.
I had my hand up much earlier to address things in the second resolution that you had up. Quite frankly, when we were talking about people to be involved with the reallocation of police funds, it kind of went along with some of what Latrice was saying, but I'd like to be a little more specific. When you're dealing with substance use disorders or addictions, as some people like to refer to them, you need to remember that that the war on drugs and narcotics are a systematic way for law enforcement to catch low-hanging, nonviolent, low-level offender fruit and continue to incarcerate and imprison people. White and Black, Indigenous people of color use drugs at about the same amount, and yet what we're seeing is our Black, Indigenous people of color are the ones that are being arrested and incarcerated for drug use. That's the same as for white people too. Remember Breonna Taylor, that was a no-knock warrant that got her killed. That's all narcotics. Until we address the racism that was the fundamental start of the war on drugs, way back probably in 1928 and moving forward, we're not, you cannot you can reallocate funds for the narcotic calls or the substance use calls or addiction calls, but you should have specialized people that are doing that if you're going to reallocate funds. And in that section B, it also talked about housing. And I don't know if anybody's interested in it, but I think housing is directly involved with police brutality. And I believe that housing and reallocating funds should be used specifically for that purpose, because our low-income neighborhoods and our zip codes determine how we are policed in this country. And people of color's neighborhoods are policed in a much different manner than suburbs are policed, or where there are predominantly white people living. So I believe that it all has everything to do with police brutality. And I think we should consider reallocation of funds specifically as a way to invest in neighborhoods and zip codes so that everybody is being treated equally and fairly. And we can build those neighborhoods up so that the fallacy that they need to be policed more, we can get rid of that notion by reallocating funds and putting them into housing, and also ancillary people that can help law enforcement with such things as substance use disorders and addiction. And those were the things that I kind of wanted to point out. And I also have some very good information from study out of Ames, Iowa, and Des Moines in 2019, citing housing as part of the bigger problem when we're dealing with police brutality. And I have some good data on drug courts and how people are not getting the help they need because we have judges making decisions instead of doctors and nurses and mental health professionals and social workers and people that work in harm reduction. So there's a whole lot more that could be included in this allocation and how we're breaking down the way we look at police brutality, because the roots are deep in this country, very deep. And I would like to help be part of that solution instead of continuing to put Band-Aids on things. So that was pretty much what I had to say. And thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Ms. Brown. And I guess I would just say, if you have any information that you want to, submit, you could certainly send that to our director at the commission.
Well, Janelle, I have a lot of information. I've been working in the Quad Cities now since my own dear son died in 2011 from a heroin overdose.
I'm sorry.
And I'm here to tell you that, well, thank you for that. But what I'm trying to tell you is that this drug war, which is a war on poor people and Black, Indigenous people of color, is the root of a lot of this police brutality. So we don't want to forget that. And we want to make sure that we know they intersect. And when we're asking for solutions, and specifically in the reallocation of funds, we need to keep that front and center. When we're talking about those things, if we want any sustainable solutions moving forward. And we have to, I'm just going to throw this in there, we really do need to address qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is tied up in state legislatures, and we need to address it and we need to remove it. Police, law enforcement should be accountable for their actions just like citizens are.
I'm sorry, you were just breaking up there. When you first started that comment, I couldn't make out what you were saying, and I'm trying to take notes on what you're saying.
I'm talking about qualified immunity, Janelle. That's something that truly needs to be not just looked at, it needs to be eliminated. Law enforcement needs to be just as accountable as you and I would be walking down the street if we do something wrong. So that's what's protecting them, and a lot of it's, like you said earlier, tied up in state legislatures.
Kim, I'm sorry to interrupt. We are 22 minutes over.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? It sounds like, Latrice, we're without a caption, or is that the problem?
They're here, but I don't want to be disrespectful of their time. I have not gotten a response to the email.
Yeah. Any more comments from folks in the meeting? And I haven't received anything from Ruby, so I have no reason to think that she does either. If there are no further public comments, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your right hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned, and we will convene our special meeting at 5:30 on Thursday. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Goodbye.